Have you ever wondered, what if everything you know about ancient Rome is a lie, not just a mistake, not just an oversimplification, but a deliberate myth, crafted over centuries by films, school textbooks, and even politicians? Today we will uncover the 6 most persistent myths about Rome. Myths you may still believe today. Each one is not just a misunderstanding. It's a key to understanding how truth becomes legend. And if you think Rome was all about white togas, invincible legionaries, and eternal victories, you are wrong. But let's start with the most common myth and move toward the most shocking and little-known truth. 1. Why do Romans in movies look like Europeans from the 19th century? Imagine this. You're watching Spartacus, Gladiator, or even the Soviet Ben-Hur. All the senators, emperors, and legionaries are light-skinned, blue-eyed, as if they stepped out of a European painting. It seems obvious. Rome was the cradle of white civilization. But is that really true? Let's look into the archives. The Roman Empire, at its peak, in the 2nd century of the current era, spanned 25 modern countries. From Scotland in the north to the Sahara in the south. From Portugal in the west to Syria in the east. This was the first global empire, and there was no place for racial boundaries. Emperor Septimius Severus, who ruled from 99 to 215 of the current era, was born in Leptis Magna, modern-day Libya. His father was a Berber, his mother Phoenician. Septimius spoke Latin with an accent and proudly embraced his African roots. Ethiopian legionaries served in Britain, proven by skeletons with dark pigmentation found during excavations at the fortress of Eboracum in York. Statues of Roman gods were brightly painted. Black, red, gold, white marble was simply faded paint, not a symbol of purity. Why does this myth still exist? In the 17th century, European scholars began to glorify Rome as the cradle of civilization. But to justify colonialism, they erased skin color from history. The white statues in museums are the result of deliberate bleaching. Rome was not a white empire. It was a mosaic of peoples, and its strength lay precisely in this diversity. The myth of a white Rome was created later to justify racism. 2. Were legionaries invincible? We tend to think of legionaries as super soldiers who won at any cost. But the truth is far more complex. The Roman army lost over 200 battles during 300 years of imperial rule, sometimes catastrophically. Is it true that legionaries never lost? And why do we believe they were unbeatable? The Battle of Cannae Hannibal crushed the Romans, killing 50,000 legionaries in a single day. This was the greatest military defeat in Roman history. And also the defeat in the Teutoburg forest on the 9th day of September 999 of the current era. 3 entire legions were destroyed by Germanic tribes. That's about 15,000 soldiers. Why does this myth still exist? Films only show victories, because defeats don't sell. But Rome survived not through bravery, but through learning from its mistakes. After Cannae, the legions changed their tactics and defeated Hannibal in Spain. Legionaries were not invincible. Their strength came from discipline born of fear. And if you thought they won through sheer strength, you never saw them trembling before battle. 3. Did Rome fall because of the barbarians? We're used to blaming barbarians, Huns, Goths, Vandals, for storming Rome and destroying the empire. But is it true that they invaded and shattered Rome? Who really killed the Roman Empire? Barbarians were inside Rome long before its fall. In 363 of the current era, Emperor Julian allowed Goths to serve in the army. By the 500th year, half of all legionaries were barbarians. Even Emperor Romulus Augustulus, the last ruler of the Western Empire, was the son of a Germanic chieftain. He spoke Latin with an accent and wore barbarian clothing. The real reasons for the fall: inflation. By 383, a loaf of bread cost 500,000 sesterces, up from just 200. Corruption. Senators sold offices for gold. Declining birth rates. By the 500th year, the average family had less than 1 child. Economic collapse. It's easier to blame outsiders than admit the empire killed itself. The barbarians didn't destroy Rome. They filled the void when the system stopped working. Rome did not fall by barbarian swords. It died from internal decay, like any organism that stops growing. 4. Was Caesar the first emperor? Julius Caesar is the most famous Roman of all. His name became a title, Kaiser, Tsar. But was he actually an emperor? And why didn't Caesar become emperor? Caesar was a dictator, a temporary position in the Republic. Emperor was not the same as dictator. The title of emperor, a ruler with permanent command over the army, emerged only after Caesar's death. Augustus, Caesar's nephew, became the first true emperor in 49 before the current era. He created a system where the emperor was the supreme ruler, not a temporary dictator. Caesar dreamed of a crown, but the Senate refused him. When he tried to wear a royal mantle, the people shouted, "Republic!" And the Senate began a conspiracy to remove Caesar and install a more compliant dictator. But Caesar's death became the catalyst for a civil war between Roman noble houses, and in the end, his nephew came to power, completed his work, and became emperor. Why does this myth still exist? Caesar is a symbol of power, but his assassination on the 15th of March, 44 before the current era, triggered a chain of events that led to the empire. We confuse cause and effect. Caesar was not an emperor. He was the man who destroyed the republic, but never lived to create the empire. That was done by Augustus. 5. Did Romans drink only wine? We imagine Roman feasts, goblets of wine, drunken senators, but did they really drink wine like water? And why did Romans always dilute wine with water? Wine was always mixed with water in a ratio of 1:3. Pure wine was considered a barbarian drink, like beer or mead. Pasca, a drink made from fermented bread, was consumed by the poor. It contained less than 1% alcohol and was safer than water. Water in Rome was dangerous. By the 4th century before the current era, Romans had built aqueducts, but water often stagnated in cities. Wine killed bacteria, so even children drank it in small amounts. Medical treatises, like those by Galen, warned, "Pure wine destroys the mind. Always dilute it with water to preserve your reason." Why does this myth still exist? Films show wild banquets because they're dramatic, but in reality, Romans drank wine not for pleasure, but for survival. Romans were not alcoholics. They were practical people who used wine as purified water, and if you thought they drank it for fun, you didn't realize that water could kill them faster than barbarians. 6. Did slaves build the Colosseum? Who really built the Colosseum? We assume that Rome's great monuments were built by slaves, but is it true that slaves built the Colosseum? The Colosseum was constructed between 69 and 81 of the current era under Emperor Vespasian. 50,000 people worked on it, but only 1/3 were slaves. Main builders, free hired workers, stonemasons, carpenters, engineers, prisoners of war, not as slaves, but as labor recruits. Slaves were mostly used for transporting materials, not actual construction. Archaeological evidence. Tools with craftsmen's names have been found at Colosseum digs, like Tiberius Claudius stonemason. Slaves were not allowed to sign their work. Financing. The Colosseum was funded by war spoils from the suppression of the Jewish revolt. Workers were paid in sesterces. Slaves could not spend money. We associate slavery with great constructions. But in Rome, slaves were not the main workforce. They were used on plantations, not in cities. The Colosseum was not built by slaves. It was built by professional craftsmen, funded by the state. The myth of slave labor is an attempt to simplify history into the strong oppressing the weak. So why do we still believe these myths? Because movies simplify. They need spectacle, not truth. Schools teach basics, not the nuances. Truth is always more complex than legend and harder to sell. Rome was not an ideal. It was not eternal. It was not white, but it was the most advanced system of governance in the ancient world. And if you thought Rome was all about heroes in white togas, you weren't watching Rome. You were watching a myth created long after. Subscribe to find out who really killed Caesar. Like this video if you learned something new. Comment below which myth shocked you the most. Until next time, remember, history does not repeat itself, but myths repeat forever.